Hello everyone and welcome to the Constructive Criticism Network. This network is here to help you improve at Magic the Gathering at every level. From pauper leagues to top 1000 Mythic, we've got you covered. If you want to hear the entire network, head on over to our sponsor at puremtgo.com, where you can hear each and every show, each and every week, and check out their sponsor, MTGO Traders, and tell them that the CCMTG Network sent you. Now sit back, enjoy the show. From YouTube, podcasts, and more, here's this week's episode from ConstructiveCriticism.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 111 of the Common Knowledge Podcast. I am your host, Christian, and I'm joined by our co-host, Brad.
Hey, everybody.
Before we got too far into this episode, I just wanted to remind everyone that Common Knowledge and all of the podcasts on Constructive Criticism Network are sponsored by puremtgo.com. If you would like to support the show, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Constructive Criticism YouTube channel, and check out our Patreon. With that out of the way, let's get on to our podcast of the week.
All right. How you been, Christian?
Doing well. How are you?
Pretty good. A little bit of a rough holiday, but, we're pulling through it, and I'm ready for this year to be over, as I'm sure everyone else is.
I am also ready for this year to be over. There are only a few days left, and I am eagerly counting them down.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a very, very long year. Some parts of the year were productive. Some were detrimental. A lot of them were detrimental, but we got through it, and I am excited for what next year brings.
I am as well. Speaking of what next year brings, do you sort of want to talk about what next year is going to mean for the show and stuff like that?
Yeah, I do. We have a lot of stuff planned. I know everybody's excited about the changes and the little teasers we've put out here and there. We've got a lot of stuff going on. We're getting with Spencer and the whole group, trying to plan things out here in the next couple weeks. As far as show topics, we've already got a handful of guests lined up. We just need to get them scheduled. Some big name guests. We're going to start doing like an LGS spotlight, where we have preferably the owner of an LGS come on and kind of talk about their pauper scene and how it got started, and promote their store a little bit. Now's more important time than any to, if you're going to buy from your LGS, get those guys supported. They're really struggling a lot. Seems like every week I see a new tweet or new comment about someone's store shutting down, and that's a heartbreaker. So we're trying to get those guys some help, and also just talk about the local scenes across the country. I think that's pretty interesting kind of dynamic where paper varies drastically from the digital scene. So that'll be interesting to hear from those guys. We're going to be holding, we talked about this before, even before the show, we're going to be doing different types of tournaments. Common Knowledge will, and Spencer and the Heezy Game Media, we're going to be holding different tournaments for Discord members, Twitter, Patreon members, MTGO stuff, possibly some webcam paper tournaments. I don't know, we haven't got that far yet, but look for those to be happening, hopefully with some regularity. Some smaller ones, some minor ones, some free ones, hopefully a couple big ones throughout the year. But those are definitely on the docket as well. And then this is probably another change we're going to make is to the Patreon. I don't know if we've actually had this meeting yet, but there will be some changes coming to Patreon as far as the tiers and what's involved in each one of them and the perks you get. But we'll just wait for those details to come out before I say anything, so I don't want to get in over my head on that one. Is there anything you wanted to add to this list there, Christian?
Yeah, I'm not sure anything in particular. I know that you and I are both pretty excited for the upcoming year. I know that we had talked about doing some like question and answer, either like extra episodes for the Patreon, or sort of sprinkling those in every episode, to try and connect with the community a little bit more. But all in all, it's going to be a really great year to help continue to make the pauper community grow.
Yeah, I agree. Just based off the handful of ideas and guests and whatnot that we have, it's already looking like we're going to be pretty full. We've already got at least, probably 3 months worth of shows just scheduled and ready to go. You know what I mean? So, and then, on top of that, we're also going to be breaking down the meta. We will actually talk pauper. We'll actually talk MTGO and challenge results and power rankings and that sort of thing.
Yeah, the power rankings, the last power rankings episode that we did was probably one of my favorite episodes to record. And so I would love to get into doing something like that, either monthly or bi-monthly or however often.
It's definitely good information.
Yeah, so that's sort of all of our plans for next year. Did you have any like personal plans, or maybe I guess like personal resolutions that were Pauper related for next year?
I do. I've got some decent pauper resolutions for the new year for 2021. Um, Pretty common ones. I don't think anything's outrageous, but I need to get back to where I was before and playing more leagues on MTGO. I don't think I'm up to the level of being a regular challenge player yet, but um, 2, 3, 4 leagues a week. I think that's about where I need to be to get back into it, at least back to where I was pre-pandemic era. And then, I think that'll help me understand the meta a little bit better, keep up with it obviously better, and produce better content on the flip side. And then also, I want to get into recording a video series of paper pauper games where we get together and we'll play meta decks against each other, brews, may have guests on there to play decks. Not really sure yet. I'm working with one of my in real life pauper buddies. He's also on our Discord, but we're trying to figure out some sort of scheduling, figure out what kind of equipment we need, what decks we want to play, how we're going to go about it, the whole everything you don't see on the back end. That's what we're kind of working on, but hopefully we can get that rolling soon and have that hitting the screens next year.
Heck yeah, all that sounds incredibly positive. I know for me, one of my goals is I find it more helpful to like have incredibly quantifiable goals. So for this upcoming year, I want to try and play 2 leagues a week and at least a challenge a month.
Okay.
And then I still have like a non-quantifiable goal, in that I want to make a lot more friends in the online pauper community. It's weird because I always enjoy talking pauper with people, but it seems to me like online discourse moves so quickly that oftentimes like I'll be thinking about like how I want to respond to something in a group discussion.
Yeah.
And then whenever like I have everything typed out, I realize that we're like 3 topics past that.
Yeah, the conversation's like 5 minutes old.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the ways I think to circumvent not necessarily frustration, but the like feeling of being an outsider, I think, is to make more individual friends and talk more pauper one-on-one with people.
Absolutely.
So I'm looking to be a lot more active online this year, to really make some positive changes in the community.
Yeah, that's great. That's a perfect place to start. I was not my pauper personality, or whatever you want to call it, my pauper persona didn't exist on Twitter before 2020. And now I've just made an unbelievable amount of friends that, we message back and forth. We play on Spell Table together. It's just, I can't imagine 2020 without them, honestly. So that's a really good resolution, I think.
Yeah. Well, all that is sort of what we're looking forward to in 2021. But I guess we can sort of move on to our main topic, which is 2020 in review.
Okay.
So I think sort of how we wanted to do this was sort of just go over a lot of the big things that happened in Pauper, the sets that released, cards that we either liked brewing with or that had a really, really big impact on the format. And I guess we can go ahead and start with the top, which I believe was Theros Beyond Death.
Yeah, they're pretty much. I put the links in the show notes, basically in chronological order. So yeah, top down. Theros came out early February, late January of this year. So it's a good place to start, I think.
Yeah, Theros to me was a set with a lot of cool cards that I wasn't personally excited about any of them. Like, it was cards that I could see why people thought that they were cool, but it was really hard for me to become attached to any of them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That being said, there were tons of cards that I enjoyed brewing with after all, and that people really enjoyed playing. For me, I think my favorite cards were the Omen Cycle.
Yep.
Particularly the Black Omen and the Blue Omen. I had tons of fun building around and just slotting into decks I was already playing, trying them out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tried out the White Omen, whose name escapes me at the moment, but yeah, I tried him in a lot of white weenie decks, constellation type decks, heroic decks, anything that had ethereal armor that counted enchantments on the board. Um, so yeah, those were a lot of fun to play with. The only one I played with, the four of them, the only one I didn't play with was the green one. I don't know if that one's any good at all. I've never actually seen it played. I've only seen it, just pictures of it. So I think the popular opinion is that one is fairly unplayable.
I would say so. That's even like looking at things in an optimistic lens, I would say so. But yeah, I think there was one card that I think made probably a pretty big splash though in Sentinel's Eyes.
Yep.
Which for people that don't know was the aura that cost 1 white, enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has vigilance, but then it also has escape for that white, and you exile 2 other cards from your graveyard.
That's so powerful.
Yeah, it's very powerful. One of the big downsides to playing the like heavy aura decks is that sometimes you lose like you inherently trade 3 or 4 cards for 1 if your opponent ends up removing your creature.
Yep.
And so having something that can be played more than once helps make up for that.
Yeah, if you've got your Trailblazer with 18 pairs of pants on it, it can still get cast down, and then you're just out an entire hand worth of cards, essentially.
Right.
But yeah, now with Sentinel's Eyes, it's pretty potent.
Yeah. Another card that I thought was a lot of fun was Lampad of Death's Vigil.
Yeah, that one's been showing up a lot lately. It got brewed with a little bit right after the set hit digital, and even in paper, I guess. But as of lately, it's been showing up in a lot of black decks. I like it.
Yeah. Again, for people that don't know, Lampad of Death's Vigil is a converted mana cost 2, 1 generic, 1 black. It's an enchantment creature. It's a 1/3, and you can pay 1 and sacrifice a creature, and you basically drain each opponent of a life, and you gain a life. It's a lot of fun in the black aggro decks. I don't know. I know that you've been playing the Tortured Existence decks. Has this been something that you guys have been toying around with? I don't know. Maybe this is a staple of those decks. I just don't personally have much experience with them.
No, I don't. I have not played with this in Tortured Existence, and I don't think that I've seen it in any lists. But yeah, it's worth a shot. Like we talked about before, that deck is super toolboxy. So really, no creature that's in the colors is out of the question, at least to try out.
I will say that one of the reasons that maybe Lampad of Death's Vigil might not exactly work is it seems like a lot of Tortured Existence isn't necessarily like wanting to abuse the ability to sacrifice creatures per se, but just the ability to have access to the same creature multiple times.
Yeah, you'd almost rather discard a creature than you would sacrifice a creature. That could be a backup plan. There's quite a few Tordex decks that run either Carrion Feeder and or Mortician Beetle. You know, that could be an option if you want to take that sacrifice aristocrat sort of slant to Tordex. That could be an option, but yeah, you're right. Sacrificing a creature is not high on the list of priorities for that deck.
Yeah. And then I think a card that you and I forgot it existed till you mentioned it to me. I think you and I both really liked it was Fruit of Tezzerus.
Yes, this is one of my favorite ones from Theros. It shows up, really I've only seen it in the mono black burn, black rogues, whatever you want to call it deck. But it's a sorcery for 1 black. Target player loses 2 life, and you get to escape it for a black and 3 and exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. So similar to Sentinel's Eyes, but it's like black's version of Shock, I guess.
I don't know. All in all, what did you think about Theros Beyond Death this year? Was it like one of your favorite sets? Was it?
The original Theros is one of my favorite sets. I think because of that, I held the expectations of this set a little too high, and they didn't quite get there. If every single card from Theros Beyond Death had been printed into a set with a completely new name, I would probably love the set, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand.
I think because it's Theros, I don't like it. it didn't live up to my expectations, I guess.
And then, either shortly after or shortly before Theros Beyond Death came Ikoria.
Yep, Ikoria was right after. Yeah, it should have been the second set after, or the first set after Theros. Lair of the Behemoths.
Yeah. Ikoria, I'm not sure like what your initial impression of it was. For me, I was pretty excited. I felt like there was going to be a lot of powerful cards in it, and in my opinion, there were.
Yeah, I agree. I wasn't sure what to expect with Ikoria. It's always weird when we go to a new plane that no one's ever seen before, no one's ever heard of before. Maybe it's only ever been mentioned in flavor text. So I went in pretty wide open, pretty open-minded with it, and I do really enjoy the set. It's a cool set, very interesting, very good storyline. Like you said earlier before the show, I think the plane itself is very neat with these gigantic beasts and all this craziness going on. I don't know how you felt about the set, but overall I liked it. I thought it was a fun set. The what is that mechanic already? Mutate effect. I don't know how much that really affected Pauper at all, but I thought it was interesting. You know, you just keep building your creature bigger and bigger and putting all these counters on it, and eventually you got a stack of cards. It's similar to a heroic deck or a enchantment matters type deck where you're just stacking cards on top of each other to make the biggest, strongest creature you can. It's just not enchantments.
Yeah. Interestingly, I think one of the cards that you and I were pretty excited about talking about again was Migratory Greathorn.
Yes.
But outside of that guy, I don't remember too many like super exciting mutate cards for Pauper. And that was sort of the one disappointing thing about this set to me, was that the mutate mechanic felt like one of those mechanics, similarly to Monarch, that could become like a staple of Pauper.
Yeah, I was
somewhere in
kinda
a different
leaning-
universe.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping, to a certain extent, I was hoping that it would be a lot more ubiquitous than it ended up being. But yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I don't know. I was really hoping that it was going to be one of those things that it was like Pauper is the Monarch and mutate format, you know, really.
Right.
Pauper does have an identity, and I don't want to pretend that it doesn't, but I think that this would have been a really good addition to that identity.
Yeah, if you look up, you know, in a parallel universe and you're on Goldfish and you look at Pauper League results, it just says blue-black mutate or Selesnya mutate or, you know, is it mutate, mono-white mutate, something like that. That would have been pretty neat, I think, but alas, that's not the case.
Yeah, but I don't
There
know.
was one other one. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, there was one we didn't put on the list, but since you mentioned the mutate, Cavern Whisperer saw a little bit of play. I don't know if it was just because it's a shiny new toy when Ikoria came out, but that did see a little bit of play. It's black and 4 for a creature nightmare, possibly the best creature type in all of Magic. And it has Menace. It's a 4/4, and it mutates for a black and 3. And whenever this creature mutates, each opponent discards a card. So not super powerful, but it did see a little bit of play. I think after 3 or 4 games with it, you may realize how good it is not, and just sort of take it out of your deck, I assume. But that's the only other one I could think of that even saw tabletop at all.
Yeah. Now, I will say the mutate mechanic, from what I've seen, I don't have much experience with Pauper Cube per se, but a lot of the cube lists that I sort of follow or have like read through seem to feature the mutate mechanic. So maybe that's the home for it.
Okay. Yeah, I can see if I can slot a few into my cube. I know I have the Great Horn, and I think I even put Cavern Whisperer in there, but things like Cloud Piercer, and there was one other one I was looking at. I'm willing to try those out. They seem like they'd be fun in a limited environment.
Yeah. But outside of the mutate mechanic, I was pretty pleased with Ikoria overall. To me, it's pretty rare that like just a normal standard set gets you a lot of really powerful cards for Pauper.
Yeah.
But, you know, with this set, we had Ram Through and Of One Mind, which all either still see or saw a lot of main deck play in a lot of the top meta decks.
Yep, it's still out there.
Yep. I know that Serrated Scorpion was one of those, probably one of the top cards played in the Tier 2 or Tier 3 decks or that people were brewing with.
Yep.
I know Suffocating Fumes was one that I was pretty excited about at the time, and I think it was a little bit less good than I thought it was going to be, but it still ended up being pretty good.
Yeah, it was one of those tricky ones that seemed a lot better than it ended up being, but you still see it in sideboards quite a bit. Same with the next one, Unexpected Fangs. Yeah, it's just another one. It used to see main deck play quite a bit, but now it's sort of relegated to the sideboards, usually as a one-of, same with Suffocating Fumes. But I think they see enough regular play to still consider them a bonus from the set.
Like I said, I was pretty pleased with the cards that did come out of Ikoria for sure.
Yeah, overall, I really enjoyed the set.
Yeah, and then sort of, I'm not sure exactly how much further down the line came Jumpstart.
Yeah, I feel like we had mystery boosters right after Ikoria. And honestly, I didn't get out and draft. Obviously, couldn't really leave the house or anything, so I didn't do a lot of mystery boosters. I'm not really sure if there was much in there outside of reprints that was worth talking about.
Yeah, no, honestly, this might have been, at least for me, the worst possible time for mystery boosters to have been a thing. Because I probably would have drafted mystery boosters a lot had the state of the world not been in shambles.
Yeah. But I heard it was a fantastic draft environment. People just drafting multiple times a day just to get the cards. They'd play a game or two, then drop and draft again. And apparently it was a really, really fun drafting environment.
Yeah. But yeah, shortly after that, or sometime, I'm not really good with timelines, I guess. But Jumpstart at least gave us the Thriving Lands. Not sure if there was anything else that it gave us, but the Thriving Lands are such a big part of Pauper. And it's funny, whenever we were writing the show notes, I completely and totally forgot that they existed. And I was like, I remember just like saying something along the lines of like, man, we didn't get anything from Jumpstart.
Yeah, we did. We got 5 things from Jumpstart at least that were still see play to this day in very good decks.
Yeah.
The only caveat on the Thriving Lands for me anyway, I was hoping they would enable more 3-color nonsense, 3-color decks, 3-color brews. And while they do make it a little easier to brew in more than 2 colors, they still don't make Jund, for example. They still don't make Jund a competitive possibility. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I don't know. It's pretty interesting to me. I remember when the Thriving Lands were first released, I tried to play a lot of like a Grixis deck.
Yes.
And I don't know, I've been thinking about it more ever since we looked through the Pauper Singleton list and saw the Grixis Monarch deck. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking to myself, like, man, this would probably work in Pauper with the Thriving Lands. But it seemed like you're like, and this could just be my failures as a deck builder, like you would stretch your mana base so thin trying to make it so good that it was just like a turn behind the format.
Yep, I think that's the perfect way to put it. Every time I tried to build a black, red, green or a Grixis style deck, that's exactly what it ended up being. I was still playing turn 2 while they were playing turn 4 and getting me with big spells, and I was still trying to fix my mana on turn 2 and 3, and then finally putting something down on the table, and all of a sudden I was dead.
Yeah, but Jumpstart, thank you for the Thriving Lands. Sorry
overall,
if you gave me other stuff.
In the established lists, Thriving Lands are fantastic.
But yeah, and then after that, we sort of got to Core Set 2021.
Yeah, and this one was surprising. When we talked about it earlier, or when I made the show notes, I thought, well, I got to put Core Set in there because it's a Core Set, and we get 1 or 2 a year, and I didn't really think we'd be able to find much out of it, but I must have completely forgot about half of this set because we got a pretty decent list here of cards that I think, some of them see play every day, and some of them are definitely worthy of some good, like you said, tier 2, maybe tier 2.5 type decks.
Yeah, and I don't know, a lot of these cards, it's interesting. Core Set 21 sort of gave us the type of cards that I really like, which are cards that can slop into the top slot into the top tiers of the metagame, but also can be cards that slot into your brews and be just powerhouses in them. The card that comes to mind for me, and I'm pretty sure it comes to mind for you as well, is Village Rites there.
Yes, that was the first one I thought of. Yep.
Just, card that's very powerful at the top tiers of the metagame, but then, just a really nice instant speed trick that lets you fight Fall from Favor from the top tables as well as advance your own game plan. It really helped Brews out this year, I think.
Yeah, it helped a lot. It made a lot of archetypes actually viable, and it sees a lot of play in other formats too. I mean, obviously not just standard, but from what I understand, it sees quite a bit of modern play. Maybe not in the tier decks, but I think that shows you where its power level actually is.
Yeah. And then a card that I thought was going to see more play, it saw a lot of play early on, I think, was Goblin Wizardry. There were the blue-red Wizardry decks that ran around. And I
love this card so much.
Yeah, I was really excited because it was really reminiscent to me of when I first started playing Pauper, which that was when some of the fan favorite decks were Mystical Teachings decks, as well as the blue-red control decks that won. I think the card was called Flurry of Horns.
Yeah, for the Minotaur tokens.
Yeah, and it was this was better Flurry of Horns that your Mystical Teachings could also get.
Yeah, exactly. And for those of you at home, Goblin Wizardry, if you're not familiar with it for some reason, it's a red and 3 for an instant. You get to create 2 1/1 red Goblin Wizard tokens with prowess.
Yeah.
Every word about that just sounds good to me.
Yeah, I know that I've told you a few times that I'm not really big on flavor, but just looking at the art and what the card does and the flavor text, which for the folks at home is quiet in the library, soon gave way to larger concerns. Just the whole thing, you got the guys shooting either fire or lightning or maybe both around a library. It's it really is such a flavor win and a card that I was really excited about, and I was sort of sad to see it fall out of favor so quickly.
Yeah, and I have seen it show up in a couple 4-1 or 5-0 lists, but it never really sticks around. It's usually a deck that caught its opponents by surprise, and then that was it.
And then,
but I think on MTGO, Goblin Wizardry was the first playset I bought as soon as it was available, because I was certain that card was going to be the end all be all, and every 5-0 list was going to be running them. But that was not the case.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not too late for Goblin Wizardry.
Oh, no.
I am holding out hope that one day there will be a great Goblin Wizardry deck again.
Yes. I think we can make that happen.
And then, I don't know, there was a card for me that I was personally really excited about, also from Core Set 21, that I really wanted to be good. I understood why it wasn't, but I'm not convinced that it couldn't be good. And that was Rise Again, which for the folks at home costs 4 generic and a black, and it's just a sorcery that returns target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Yeah, pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I have a huge affinity for Reanimator decks. This card does the Reanimator thing. I'm not convinced that this card doesn't have a home in a really slow Reanimator deck. That would basically be a control deck that just plays a Reanimator combo to win.
Right.
Where you play a few Rise Agains, then play sets of Ulamog's Crushers and Dragon's Breath to sort of get things going. But
yeah,
there's just so many moving pieces in something like that I'm not sure that I have the brain power to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, that's a lot of math that I'm not too good at working on or speaking, apparently. Is it the 5 CMC of that spell that makes it near unplayable?
I would say so, yeah. One of the things that was pretty frustrating whenever it got spoiled, and I know that I wasn't the only person that was frustrated about this, is that for a long time in Pauper, there was a Mardu Reanimator deck that the card's name blanks me, but it played a white Reanimator spell that cost 4 mana.
Oh, was it Resurrection? No. I know what you're talking about. So I can find it real quick.
And so it played that in Exhume. And one of that deck's issues is that the mana wasn't consistent enough. So it was like, oh yes, we're finally getting a black reanimator spell to go with Exhume to make this deck more consistent and sort of push it. But then it costs one more than the white spell. And
Yeah.
yeah, and four mana is sort of pushing it, but can still be good. But five mana, I don't know what it is about the extra turn that just kills the card.
That's a lot. Pauper's a turn 3, turn 4, typically that that speed of a format, and 5 mana to bring back. I mean, what are you bringing back typically? You know what I mean? Unless you, like you said, unless you're specifically putting your big old beefy dudes in the graveyard. Um, I don't think you want that card in your deck at all, honestly.
Yeah.
There is, let's see. So I put in there in Scryfall search for pauper cards in white that do what you want them to do, and there seems to be 4 of them. There's Breath of Life, which is a white and 3 for a sorcery. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. There is False Defeat, which is essentially the same thing, a white and 3 for a sorcery. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Resurrection is 2 white and 2 for the same sorcery, same text. And then Settle Beyond Reality from Modern Horizons. It's a modal card for a white and 4. Choose one or both. Exile target creature you don't control. Oh, this is more of a flicker. Sorry, flicker effect. Not a true reanimator effect. So we got 3 of them at least.
Yeah, and like I said, one of the frustrating things about those was you have to stretch your mana so far. Mm-hmm. And I'm still holding out hope that eventually we get a reanimator spell for Pauper that costs 4 or less, but probably 4 mana and is also black.
Yeah, I believe when Rise Again was spoiled, I think it was Sean the Lobbert that even tweeted out something about why are these effects in black always so expensive? And I think you just mirrored that sentiment.
Yeah. But yeah, and then now you also got more fun cards from Core Set 21. I think Frantic Search was in this set again.
Yep.
And then I know a card that you seem to like a lot, or at least it seems like I see you talk about it a lot, but maybe I'm just making that up, as Llanowar Visionary.
Llanowar Visionary, yeah. For a while I talked about it when it was spoiled and when it came out, and when I tried to make it good. I tried everything I could to put it in a good deck. And funny enough, I actually tried to brew with it a lot in those 3-color Thriving Land decks that I was moaning on about earlier. It is a good card. It's a green and 2 for an elf druid. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. You can tap it to add green, and it's a 2/2. So it's a 2/2 mana dork, which isn't terrible. And it does replace itself. So it's pretty much on rate for its CMC, but more often than not, I just would sit there, untap on turn 3, and really debate whether I wanted to cast this thing at all. I could either double spell, cast 2 different things, or cast this one creature that was likely to die next turn and replace itself with more than likely a land, because in the 3-color decks I was generally heavy on land cards. So, but yes, like you said, I am not a master builder either, so I'm sure a lot of that had its effect on whether this card was playable or not, but overall I still like it. I think it's a great card. It's fun to play with.
Yeah, now do you think that this card could I'm not sure if it already does, but like do you think that this card would be good in like a Temur Cascade, or like just like the Temur mid-range Monarch sort of decks that we see from time to time?
Looking at it, my initial reaction would be to say no, but I do like the fact that it does replace itself. I guess if you could give it, those decks typically give haste to all their creatures. It might not be too bad. I wouldn't go heavy on it. Maybe a 1 of. That way, if you cascade into it, it doesn't feel terrible. But if you cascade into it every single time, then you're likely to just get rid of it altogether. But I could see it as a one of, and I think I also mentioned it earlier, possibly a one of in Tortured Existence, because like I said, it's got that magic keyword on there, draw. Draw equals dredge, essentially. So it's pretty versatile when it comes to something like that sort of shell.
Yeah. Were there any other cards from Core Set 21 that we were maybe missing?
I did put Track Down on here. I did not play with that one a whole lot. I think it's another one of those that either looks really good and is not, or I am just not smart enough to make it good, which there are plenty of those in this game. But Track Down is a sorcery for a green and 1. You scry 3 and then reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature or land card, you draw a card. And that's it.
Yeah, that's I don't know, that seems like one of those cards that much like a card that we'll talk about a little bit later in the show, I think is one of those cards that seems really good but doesn't necessarily do enough or doesn't do its effect at a high enough rate to be played much.
I think what got people is that it's green, it's 2 mana, and it has a wall of text on it.
Yeah.
So, but I think after playing with it a little while, I don't really see it in any brews or anything anymore. Maybe it'll come back. I don't really know what you're scrying for. Then again, I might put it in Tortured Existence. Who knows? It is green. It lets me draw, scry, get lands, get creatures. It's pretty versatile in that respect, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've joked about this a few times that it is a green and or black card that has text on it. It can be played in Tortured Existence.
Yeah, pretty much. That's it. If it does anything other than be just a creature, it's viable in that deck.
Yeah. And then after Core Set 21, at some point, we had Double Masters, which gave us...
it was like less than 4 weeks later, because they were being spoiled at just about the same time, I remember. I mean, it's all kind of a blur, but...
Yeah. I don't know. This pretty much just gave us cool reprints. I think the big one is Oubliette.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Oubliette, the fancy Urza lands, the goofy-looking Karn, all that stuff.
Yeah. And then after that quick pit stop, we went back to Zendikar with Zendikar Rising.
We had 2 return sets this year. We went back to Theros and back to Zendikar.
Yes, we did.
And unfortunately, I think this return to Zendikar felt about the same as the return to Theros. It might have been a little bit better, but it was one of those that we spoke about earlier. Flavor-wise and what they were trying to do with the announcement of the Forgotten Realms set and the whole D&D merge and all this stuff, they really nailed a lot of the flavor. As you called it, a flavor win on a lot of these cards. I just don't think many of them or the set as a whole really had that big of an impact on our format, but there are a few that we'll talk about that are definitely out there and they still see play.
Yeah, I think the main one that sort of, I know it sees play in other formats and saw some play in our format and was a card that I was excited about, was Cleansing Wildfire.
Yeah. This one just about burned Twitter to the ground when it was spoiled. You were either in love with it from the get-go or you wanted to quit the game. There was nobody in between on this one.
Yeah, I don't know. I was one of those people in love with it, I think.
Yeah, I still am. Yep.
For the people that don't know, Cleansing Wildfire costs 1 generic and 1 red. It's a sorcery. It just destroys target land. And then that land's controller can search their library for a basic land and put it into play tapped. And then you draw a card. It's obviously a really, really powerful card. Destroys Tron lands, thriving lands, that sort of thing.
Yep. I think, I don't know if I'm stepping on your toes, but I think more often than not where you see this card played is you're actually targeting your own lands, such as Darksteel Citadel, which cannot be destroyed. So you're essentially ramping yourself by a land and drawing a card for a red and 1.
Yeah, so that is actually a really interesting use of this card that I think the first time I talked about it, like whenever it was first spoiled. I completely and totally missed that that's something that you can do.
Yeah, I did too.
But a lot of the times, like whenever you see this card played, and that's something that I think is nice about the card, is that like you can play it and target your own lands, and so because of that, that lowers the cost of playing it.
Yeah, it's just half the cost,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah, and then outside of that, though, it seemed like we just got cards that were either fringe playables or cards that you might want to brew around.
Yeah, a lot of brew-worthy cards here in this set.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you had any in particular that you were like super excited about.
In general, I'm super excited about landfall as a mechanic, and we got a couple for that. Echoum Hellhound, which is just the 1-drop with landfall. But no, overall, we got a couple sideboard cards from Zendikar. Feed the Swarm, Marauding Blight Priest sees play every now and then in some sort of Soul Sisters life gain deck. I thought Spare Supplies, I thought that artifact would be a little more, or have more of an impact than it did, or does. But no, really the only one that sees any regular play at all would be Tuk Tuk Rubble Fort.
Yeah, and what does Tuk Tuk Rubble Fort do, just for the people at home?
Sure. Let me pull it up. I was on the wrong page.
Oh, you're fine.
Tuk Tuk Rubble Fort is a red and 2 for a creature wall. It's an 0/3. It's got Defender and Reach, and creatures you control have haste. So where are we seeing this card lately?
This card has been sort of all through the Walls combo decks, which, funnily enough, is a deck that before the show started I commented that I don't think I'm anywhere near smart enough to play that deck. And I don't know, it's honestly astonishing to me, and it's one of the things that I love the most about Pauper, is that obviously like everyone really likes to brew in Pauper, but the top tables in the Pauper online metagame just have such cool cards in them as well. And
They really do.
This is like one of those examples of I can't imagine this card being playable in any other format or any other like a card similar to this. I couldn't even imagine it being similar in any other card games.
Yeah. But here it is at the top deck. Now it's constantly 5-0ing. It's showing up in challenges, and here it is.
Yeah. And then I know that you mentioned Spare Supplies. That was a card to me that sort of disappointed.
Yeah, I was very disappointed. I was just getting ready to say the same thing. It's an artifact for 2 generic mana. Spare Supplies enters the battlefield tapped, so you can't sacrifice it. You can't tap and sacrifice it the turn it comes into play. But when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. And then for 2 mana, you tap it and sacrifice it, and you draw another card. I thought for sure this was going to be a staple in Boros decks, or heck, even in some Tron lists. And I brewed with it a little bit in Tron, just various Tron builds, nothing crazy. And it was okay. You liked it the first when it came entered the battlefield because you got to draw a card, but really after that you didn't really feel like spending 2 mana to draw a card. It's essentially like cracking a clue token, so why not just have the Thraben Inspector?
Yeah,
I don't know, that's kind of how I look at it. I mean, I guess I didn't really play with it in any sort of Metalcraft or ATOG Fling Affinity shell, but the little bit I did play with it, it was disappointing.
Yeah, I wholly agree. That was a card that I remember being really excited for.
And that was probably another one that I was tricked by, based solely off the flavor itself, the art and the name, and Adventurers. It's an adventuring set, and D&D's coming out soon, and Spare Supplies, and this is going to be good, and it just wasn't.
Yeah. And then sort of getting away from Zendikar Rising, a while after that, we had Commander Legends, which is all the new hotness.
All the new hotness. It's destroyed Pauper. What are you talking about? It's all anyone's playing.
Yeah, I don't know that. I have no actual data to back this up, but Pauper seems to be the least popular format in Magic by a wide margin now.
Seems like it.
Yeah. I don't know. It's Commander Legends, obviously, I really don't want to get too far into the weeds on this set because consensus is really still out. I'm sure eventually some things will probably get banned or the metagame will radically shift and stuff.
Right.
But there were a lot of cool cards in this set, and it would be fun in like 4 or 5 months to have like a retrospective on this set, I think.
I think I will write down that idea right now. That's a good one. I like that. You know, and you're right, though. It came out, the week before Thanksgiving. So we've had it maybe 6 weeks. And of those 6 weeks, 2 of those weeks were holiday, Christmas, Thanksgiving and all that. I just don't think the majority of December is enough to make judgment on a particular set or its impact. Obviously, its impact was instant and powerful. But you're right. Someone on Twitter recently commented or posted a message saying that, yeah, Commander Legends, Fall from Favor, all this stuff has really, quote unquote, hurt the format and made it strictly a Monarch format. But I don't remember the last time that decks were this diverse. I mean, looking at the Walls combo deck and just everything that's sort of come out of this format lately, out of necessity, honestly.
Yeah,
I just think it's been pretty interesting.
I don't know. There's been a lot of stuff I think that was cool that came out of the set. I will say that normally I'm not like this with bans and pauper, though. I might be a little bit more quick to the gun because there have been some times that we've waited around a little bit too long to ban cards, I think.
Yes.
So if it does end up, over the course of like January, either the first half or all of January, that the metagame becomes a little bit more imbalanced, or it seems like the same cards keep dominating, then maybe I'll be more of an advocate for stuff like that.
Sure.
Because you don't want to wait too long, but I do agree with you that essentially being able to play with these cards at a high rate for basically 4 or 5 weeks probably isn't enough to really make too many judgments. But there were obviously very powerful cards in this set.
Yeah, very powerful. Yeah, and granted, there will be, by mid-January, there will be tens of thousands of games played on MTGO in the pauper format. But, yeah, you're right. I think it just needs a little bit longer. But we'll see what comes of it if they make a decision on January 2nd or March 3rd or whenever it may be. It'll be interesting to find out where they go with it.
Yeah. But yeah, that was sort of 2020 in review for pauper. It's interesting, for pauper things were much less dramatic than they were for my personal life, and it sounds weird being thankful for like a format or a game, but there were a lot of stuff, like getting to talk pauper with people when I could or play when I could sort of really helped center this year for me. Not just this hobby, but a few different hobbies did that.
Sure. Yeah, you gotta have your group, man. It's very important.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess that was the year, and now we can sort of get on to this current week, what cards we might be playing in the sideboard.
Sure. You want to go ahead and start?
Yeah. For me, I had an interesting card. It's a card that I've loved forever, and I haven't really had much of a chance to talk about it, and you and I were talking about it some before the show. That was Viper's Kiss. Costs 1 black. It's an enchantment aura. You enchant a creature, and the creature gets -1/-1, and its activated abilities can't be activated.
Yep. And what made you... Have you just always loved this card? Like, were you playing when Theros came out, and you just saw it and fell in love with it, or...
So, I don't remember exactly the first time that I saw this card. I do know the shop that I played at a lot at the time. Basically, there was a group of people. I was primarily an EDH player. And there was a group of people that had given up on EDH, and they wanted to play PDH instead.
Ah, yes.
And looking through, just the common boxes or whatever, this was, one of the cards that it was, people's commanders would have activated abilities or whatever. And for me, it was always fun to be like, well, you wanted to do this entire thing, and I have 1 card. Cost 1 mana.
Shut you down.
Yeah, it just invalidates whatever you're doing,
Okay.
And so from falling in love with it there, that sort of morphed into just when is this card good? And I've wanted to talk about it for a while, and I almost didn't talk about it tonight, but before the show, like we were talking about, man, what is this really hurting Pauper? And it hurts the bane of my existence, and that is ATOG. So I figured that I would go ahead and let people know that if they are also struggling against Affinity, which to me is the hardest deck to play against in the format,
I agree.
this might be the card for you.
Yeah, it's absolutely worth a shot. I remember this card when you brought it up. It sort of came out of left field. But yeah, that would have been one. I'm sure I have it in spades in one of my bulk boxes, and I never looked at it twice. But I see the term activated ability, and I instantly don't think Pauper. We don't have a lot of that. It takes a little bit of a deeper dive to figure out what that card is good against. But yeah, I think you're right. I think ATOG is the prime target for something like that.
Yeah, but what about you? What cards do you want people to sort of slide in their sideboard for the upcoming week?
My card is an artifact. My card is a 0 casting cost artifact. It is Tormod's Crypt. It doesn't do much other than you can tap it and sacrifice it and exile all cards from target player's graveyard. It's been around forever, ever since I remember cracking one of these in the dark booster pack. I've loved it ever since. I don't know. There's just something about 0 casting cost creatures and artifacts that I instantly love, no matter how good or bad they are. There's a lot of, maybe not as much now as there was earlier this year, but there's still a fair amount of graveyard shenanigans running around. And I think because I've been playing Tortured Existence so much, I just have graveyard on my brain at all times. But this is a card that can completely shut down your opponent. It wouldn't be surprising to drop this on your board and get a scoop from across the table.
Yeah,
But
it's interesting. Go on.
And not just on the defensive side, but it is an artifact, so it does enable previously mentioned ATOG. It does trigger Metalcraft effects, prowess effects. It's good in different strategies on the offensive as well as the defensive.
Yeah, that's really, to me, every time I talk about Tormod's Crypt, that's the thing, is that this is like the best card if you're playing a proactive deck for graveyard hate.
Yep.
Because you don't have to spend your mana as a resource to have that hate. And so you can still develop your game plan.
You just crack it. It costs nothing to put it on the board and costs nothing to exile the graveyard.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
no, it's not. This is going to be more of obviously a meta call. I don't think you just build a deck and automatically slot in 1 or 2 of them in your sideboard. Because honestly, not that many, maybe 1 or 2 decks really rely on the graveyard lately, unless the deck you're playing just has particular issues against those decks, and Grimag Angler decks, or heaven forbid, Tortured Existence, or the Cycling combo deck, anything like that. It's not an automatic sideboard card, but it is one that can definitely win you games by itself.
yeah, for sure. But I guess that's going to do it for this episode of Common Knowledge. Brad, did you have anything else that you wanted to mention before we got going?
No, I think I'm good. I just kind of wanted to put out a blanket thank you to the entire Pauper community, everyone I interact with, Christian, everybody here at Common Knowledge. You sort of alluded to it earlier, or hinted at it earlier, but I don't think this year, 2020, would have been nearly as tolerable if I hadn't surrounded myself with these amazing players that turned out to be amazing friends. And you're one of them. Spencer's one of them. There's an entire list of people I could go through, but that's a whole podcast in of itself. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to the community as a whole, and I cannot wait for what 2021 brings.
Yeah. Well, anyways, if you guys wanted to get in touch with us, you can find me on Twitter at JustGuyDad. You can find Brad on Twitter at pauper_B. Or you can shoot us an email over at commonknowledgemtg@gmail.com. If you guys have any questions on the Pauper format, MTGO, or anything else, please just shoot us an email or leave a comment down below. Thanks again to our sponsor, PureMTGO.com, as well as the Constructive Criticism Network for letting us be a part of it. And last, but certainly not least, thank you for listening. Take very good care of each other.
And never stop brewing.